There we go.
Hey.
Hi. I saw your picture. It looked like a good day. How long, how far did you ride?
10 miles.
Long drive.
I mean, I can do 10. You know, if there's no wind and no little hills, I have the stamina to do 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could do another 10, except, you know, you have to be able to keep up with everyone else, and I'm slow. Like, I only
by the
go
way,
like,
it's recording if you want to hit pause. I just saw the...
When did that start? There we go. Well, welcome everyone to our post-Passover CBS Women programming. And we have a really great month. We have on Sunday, April 25th, Women's League for Conservative Judaism Virtual Regional Conference. And then before that, we have a very exciting program on the 22nd of April at 6 p.m. It's a Thursday. Cherry Steinwender, who's the executive director of the Center for the Healing of Racism, is going to be speaking. And this is something that Karen and Anna Eigler and Randy Sonnenschein and I have been putting together. It's a great conversation about learning about sensitivities to conversations we have with our friends about race and how that spills over into our lives where we don't even expect to see it. And then we have two, I'm really excited personally, we have two Prodigy events this month. I'll just go with next week. First, Emily Estes Repart is going to be talking about navigating academic hurdles with your middle schoolers and high schoolers. And those of you who have kids that age or people or grandchildren or friends, it's a great time to tune in. And then today, Alex Lewis is joining us, and Alex is the awesome offspring of David Lewis and Margaret Jelnick Lewis. And Alex is really an outstanding student. Alex is a senior in high school, but Alex is also getting her associate's degree from Lone Star College. So it's really exciting. Alex is going to be moving on to college next year. And today, Alex is going to be talking about the beginning of Alex's endeavors into cooking and pie making before Alex heads off to stage management school. So take it away, Alex Lewis.
All right, thank you. I don't think that I would give myself that fabulous of an introduction, but I guess that's why I'm not introducing myself. I'm
That's
today
the benefit
making
that we get to be able to boast a tad.
And,
exactly.
And we're all mothers here, so we get to schlep nachas. You know, it's part of the process.
Exactly.
So I'm making rhubarb raspberry pie, which is one of my personal favorites, and chai tea. The recipe is actually from an old teacher of my my brother Brandon's. So it's a very special recipe. And behind the camera is Erin, who is going to be trying to be quiet today while we're doing all of this. That was him waving. So the first thing that I'm actually going to do is normally I would start making a pie by starting with the crust, but because we're in a limited time frame today, I'm actually going to start with the filling and then move to the crust. I have a pre-made crust, so we should be able to fit it all within the time. But like I said, normally I would make the crust, start refrigerating the crust, and then start on the filling. So I use this bowl because it has a spout, and there, like I mentioned in the recipe, there's a lot of liquid that collects at the bottom, which you don't want to put in the pie, but then you can use it to make drinks. So I start with, I personally actually prefer for this frozen rhubarb. This is a pound of frozen rhubarb. I prefer frozen because what happens is then while it's defrosting, most of the liquid comes out of it. So the pie isn't as watery. So it's just 1 pound of frozen rhubarb. And then I actually use fresh raspberries because they don't have nearly as much liquid. And then 2/3 of a cup of sugar and 2.5 tablespoons of lemon juice, which just gives it a little bit of extra tartness and also helps the liquid come out of the rhubarb. And this part is not super precise, partially because some of the sugar and lemon juice will come out when you put it into the pie, and that is perfectly all right. You can also adjust the amount of sugar if you prefer a slightly sweeter filling. I prefer a little bit of tartness, so I don't add more sugar than that. And then I just gently add the raspberries on top. You don't want to break them up because they'll kind of melt naturally once they're in the pie. And then just kind of stir it gently. And we put that aside. The filling is really easy, but it does end up being really good. And then we move to the crust. The recipe for this does have making it in a bowl. I personally prefer making it in a food processor because it's easier and faster. But if you're a purist, then you don't. So food processor, it is, I think I have this memorized because I make it so often. It is 2 cups of flour, a tablespoon of sugar, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and about 1/2 cup of ice water. So that's my ice water right there that I just moved to the side. I literally just combine ice and water right before I start making the recipes. So it's very cold, which is part of what helps it stick with as little water as possible, which makes it easier to roll out later. And I forgot a knife for my flour, so I'll be right back. Here it is. Okay, so two cups of flour. And because I've made multiple pie crusts already today, we're running a bit low, but that's okay. We have more flour.
Alex, would you prefer we hold questions till later, or can we ask you questions?
You can feel free to ask. This is so routine to me that I can talk about something completely different if I really want to while making crusts. So,
all right. Well, I'm dying to know. You know, your family is really fit. Who are you cooking for that you make so many pies?
I mostly cook for us. We eat pretty well, and we don't eat out a lot. So when we make things like homemade desserts, it is kind of a treat. And also I find baking really relaxing. So I joke that I'm a bit of a stress baker. And then for my birthday last year, I actually made a 6-layer cake. I made a 6-layer rainbow cake. That was, we ended up having to give probably more than half of that away because it was so difficult to eat. But for the most part, we do just keep a lot of our baking at home. And the nice thing about making it at home is it doesn't have as many additives as stuff you would get in the store. So it is as healthy as a bunch of pie can be. So it's a tablespoon of sugar and then 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And then I just gently pulse this together. It really doesn't take much. It's just to make sure that you don't end up with any clumps of sugar or salt, which barely takes anything. And then I didn't get my butter out, so I'm going to do that now. You do want the butter to be cold so that it helps stick together. Those are empty boxes. So you actually you do leave it in the fridge kind of until the last possible moment. And the thing about this crust is you don't break up the butter as finely as you would for other recipes. Part of the flakiness of it comes from the fact that there are larger pieces of butter in it. So don't be afraid if there are kind of larger clumps. It's something I had to reteach myself because I was very used to kind of trying to get like the small pea shapes. And then I started using this recipe, and that's not at all what you want for this one. This does take a while. Can you mute me? It's gonna be loud. Thanks.
Well, nice job to the cameraman. Well done.
I'm also admiring the kitchen. It's a beautiful workspace.
I noticed that too, Debbie.
Yeah.
We need to tell Margaret and David that Alex for graduation. I hope you're not listening, Alex.
I am listening.
Alex needs cooking utensils for graduation. Yeah.
Mom's actually right behind the camera. They say that I need cooking utensils for graduation. Also, they like the kitchen.
Yeah.
I will definitely.
Yeah, of all the things you pack away and try to send off with your kid to a college dorm, we always laugh because my daughter requested to take a silpat mat and cooking utensils.
Nice.
And I'm like,
So this is the consistency of the dough. There are larger chunks in there, obviously, but that is perfectly all right. And that's actually what we want in the dough. And then finally, I do actually slightly more than half a cup of ice water. And that just helps it come together. This will not take long at all. This is definitely the easiest step of the entire process. I prefer pulsing it because running it, you cut up the butter a little bit more than you'd like. What does happen with this crust is it does kind of form little pieces more than a big clump of dough. That's actually, again, what you want because that shows that the butter is staying in its clumps, which will give it the flakiness later. What I normally do at this point is wrap it up into 2 sections and put it in the fridge and let it sit for about half an hour. But for the sake of time, I've actually already made crust and refrigerated it. So we're going to move straight on to the next step. I have the habit of weighing my crusts and labeling one top and bottom, but they're actually very close to the same weight. So there really isn't much difference. And if you don't and just eyeball it, that works as well. So we have a rolling mat, and I'm going to just lightly flour it. You may need more flour than you're used to because of the larger butter chunks, and that also depends on how long your crust has been out of the fridge. The longer it's out, the more flour you will need.
You got another one.
All right. No, someone else coming in. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then about that mat, I've never seen a mat like that. Can you talk about that, please?
I don't actually know where the mat is from. This is one that my father uses for pizza dough, which is why it has the pasta and pizza dough recipes on it. I don't know if you can see those. But it's just a standard silicone mat that has rulers on the top and bottom and 10-inch, 12-inch, and 14-inch circles around the middle, which is really nice because it just gives you an idea of how large your crust is. So I just start kind of flipping this and rolling it out. I actually learned how to roll crust
Alex,
from my father. Yes.
I noticed that the material on your rolling pin looks like it's like marble or something, and it's not wood
Yes.
in the middle. Does that make a difference when you're doing pie crust?
Personally, I think it makes it much easier to roll them out. I don't like wooden rolling pins. I think that you get stuck on the dough really easily. The nice thing about the marble is because it's so smooth, everything, like I can literally run my finger and everything just comes right off of it. So it's easier to clean. The problem is it is heavier and more breakable. But as long as you can avoid dropping it, I like it. And you don't need to use nearly as much pressure. So I can basically just roll it across and it will, for the most part, roll out my crust as much as I want it to. So it requires a little bit less effort to roll any given crust out.
What do those usually run, Alex?
Sorry?
That mat and the rolling pin.
I have no idea. These are, I'm pretty sure both of these have been in the family longer than I have. Okay. The rolling pin was a wedding present, apparently. So definitely been in the family longer than I have. So once it's rolled out and we're looking pretty good that the underside isn't sticky, I'm going to gently fold it into half and then into quarters. I'm gonna pick it up and get my pie plate. I'm gonna slowly and carefully spread it out on the pie plate. It's well floured enough that it shouldn't really stick to itself. And then I'm going to just slowly press it in and make sure that it's hanging over the edge just a little bit.
And I've looked on Amazon. It's $20 for the marble rolling pin. And I got the same one for my wedding present.
Well, I'm sure you also put it to good use. We absolutely love it. As you can see, there's slightly uneven overhang. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take food scissors and just kind of cut it roughly around the edge. There's more. This isn't super precise, especially if you're doing lattice later, but I'm not, so I'm cutting it a little bit closer than I normally would. And of course you have some scraps, but we'll use that for the top. Once it's pressed in, I try and go around the edge and just kind of press out any more air bubbles. Kind of you may have to lift the crust a little bit to make sure that they get out properly. You just want it to fit the pan. And then this is when we add the filling. So our filling at this point, can you show in the bowl, Erin? It's accumulated a lot of liquid in the bottom. So our goal as we're adding it into the pan is to actually avoid getting as much of that liquid as possible. So I pick it up, I strain it against the side a little bit, put it in. I'm not super precise about spreading it out because you can do that later. And because it's frozen, it'll break down more. The rhubarb will break down more and it'll actually kind of melt and spread, which is another reason why I kind of like using the frozen stuff. This rhubarb actually we bought fresh and then froze. Yeah, so when I'm straining it, I'm using a slotted spoon so I can get as much of the liquid out as possible, which again is just to make sure that the pie is not watery. But that was one problem that I encountered early on making, especially rhubarb pies, was that because of just the amount of water in rhubarb, I would basically have a rhubarb pie lake. And I tried to figure out how to avoid that, and using frozen rhubarb and straining it like this has been the best in terms of figuring it out. And the longer you can let your filling sit, so when you let your pie filling, or when you put your crust in, the sooner you make your filling after the pie crust goes in, the more liquid will come out, and the drier your pie will be, not in a bad way, because it still holds enough of the liquid that it'll taste wonderful.
What do you do with the leftover?
I make tea or soda. So it's basically at this point very sugary cordial. So it's just basically rhubarb raspberry concentrate. So I'll add either ice and sparkling water or hot tea or hot water and just drink it. And it is really good. I made a pie earlier and I gave Aaron some of it and he'd never tasted it before and his eyes went huge. He loved it. So it's a bit of an extra treat that you get with making the pie, is that you have that cordial at the bottom. I have tried drinking it straight. It is very sugary and I would not recommend that. But it's really good diluted. So all of that, I'm just going to pour into a glass later and drink it. It does just taste like a pie, minus the taste of the crust. So it's just an extra bonus. And the pie is very red at this point, especially because fresh rhubarb that you cut up tends to be a little bit darker. I don't know why, but if you get stuff that's straight frozen, it tends to be a little bit lighter. But that's all a very uniform dark color. We're gonna put that to the side for a minute and roll out the top crust. So most of the time on my pies, I would just do a basic lattice. It's easy, it looks really pretty. I've experimented with doing different lattices, so I'll do what I call a diagonal lattice, which is actually where instead of being like this, the cross hatches are kind of in a more diagonal pattern, so you make diamonds in the middle, which is just gives it an extra fancy touch. But for today, what I'm actually going to be doing is I'm going to be making crust roses, or I call them roses. They sort of look like roses. They're little flowers. And it just makes it look extra fancy. And I can also show you, because we made a pie earlier, what they look like when they're finished.
Alex, I need you to teach me something.
Yes. Yes.
How do you determine when to pre-cook the bottom crust a little bit? Like what types of pies get pre-cooked so they're crusty, a little crispier, and which ones do you skip that step? And
I don't like par baking crusts unless the recipe I'm using specifically says to. But if I know it's going to be very watery, or if it's something like a cheesecake where you want to have a little bit of a stiffer bottom, that's when I generally par bake it. But I tend not to with most of my pies. So once we have this rolled out, it's fairly thin. I'm gonna take a cookie cutter and you don't need to be super precise. You're gonna end up having to do this multiple times, so you don't need to be super close. You're just gonna cut out as many circles as you can. With this mat, I specifically don't rotate it because that would put more of a gouge in this mat, which I don't want to do. But then because it's so well floured, I can just lift up the scraps from around it and put them to the side for later. What I'm going to do to make the roses is I'm going to take 3 circles at a time. That one doesn't look as good, so I'm going to put it in the middle. Kind of just pat them together like that. And then once they're pretty well stuck together, I'm going to start rolling. So it's just going to make a small circle and it's slowly going to build up. Because of the fact that they're circles, you will get kind of a natural multi-layer thing going on. So when it's done, you'll have one end that looks like that, and another end that looks pretty much the same. What I then do is I'm going to cut it on a different surface, because again, we don't want to gouge the mat. I'm going to take it and cut it kind of where that last joint is. And then you have your flour, flip it, cut your other flour off, and you have that which you're just going to add to your scraps to use later. So we have these 2 flours so far. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to start making a circle of them around the edge of my pie. You can pattern them however you want. The downside of making roses is it does take a little bit longer because you have to do them kind of, I guess, 2 by 2. but it does have a fabulous looking result. So I think it's worth it. One thing that I have also done with my older brother is we've done roses around the outside and then done a different design in the middle. So you don't make roses for the entire thing, but you still get the roses because they're really pretty. So again, we have that wrap there. It looks slightly different, which is fun. Cut it, flip it, and cut it again. We have that big middle part where you can barely even see the swirl, so we'll use that later. I tend to make 2 or 3 circles on the pie. I don't put them really close together. The flowers will open up a little bit. And also because it is quite a lot of dough in each flower, generally people don't want just a mouthful of dough, unless you're me. I will just eat straight up dough cookies. But for the most part, people don't like that, so I space them out. If they don't stick together when you're rolling them properly, that's okay. Just kind of tuck them in. Because these don't need to be perfect, that's okay. If you do have to kind of have a little bit of fold or something, you've got that in this one, and that's okay.
More natural.
Exactly. If they flatten out a little bit as you're cutting them like that, that is also okay. Just pick them up from the sides, squish them back into what is vaguely a circle, and then you can put them on the pie with this one. I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to wrap it around a little bit more just to get that shape. The roses do make it a little bit more difficult to bake, just in terms of you have to watch it more carefully. They will brown more easily in your crust. But again, it partially depends on exactly your oven. And if you keep a close eye on them, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. That one's kind of fun. It's got a little bit sticking up in the middle. And again, if you have a little bit of an issue peeling them off your surface, your rolling surface, that's not a huge deal because it just gives the rose some personality. That's what I like to call that. Also at this stage, your flour or your dough doesn't have to be as floured, because if it sticks together, that's actually what you want. Yes, please. Okay. So I've got one remaining here, so I'm just going to, actually, that one's going to come over to here. I'm going to just press all of these middle bits back in, scrape up a bit of extra dough from the surface. I have to reflour it at this point because it is a little bit more sticky than I wanted it to be. And we're going to roll it out again. At this point, I'm a little bit more rough with my rolling than I am when I'm doing the bottom crust, because it doesn't need to be quite as precise. I just need to have it rolled out so that I can cut things out of it.
You ever have to put it back in the refrigerator for a while when it starts to get soft?
I prefer rolling out my dough when it's soft, so I don't. With the old recipe I used, I did have to occasionally. There was one time when I was rolling out on granite, and I just put 2 ice packs on the table and made the granite cold and just did that instead because the dough was really warm. So I put it back in the fridge and did that. That worked pretty well. But for the most part, especially with this dough, I don't find it to be that difficult when it's warm. Again, a reason why I like this dough. So I don't generally have to. If you're really having issues getting the circles up, the other thing you can do, I just use a flat spatula like this and kind of make small circles to get it under. Again, so you don't want to kind of push it straight under, because then you're going to squish it into an oval. But if you do small circles, then you get just a smaller circle, and you can stretch it out a little bit like that. Put that one on the end. That one's got a little bit poking out of the end, actually, so I'm going to just cut that. But then it looks okay. And all your roses are going to look slightly different, which is okay. So that's what we've got so far. I'm going to do a couple more.
Alex, is there a reason why you're not making a full crust on the top?
Well, so I generally don't do just straight up full crusts on the top. I think they're boring. And I like to challenge myself. I decided not to. My go-to is a lattice of some kind. I decided not to do that because the roses are more interesting. And they're just something that I like to do when I have the time. And since y'all have all set aside an hour for me, I figured, why not?
You sprinkle them with sugar before you bake them?
I do not. I don't do an egg wash or sugar. I don't feel the need to. Some people say, it browns more easily. If I was to take it somewhere and wanted it to look really pretty, I probably would do an egg wash of some kind. But what I mentioned earlier is that I don't really like a ton of sweetness in my pies. I like them a little bit more tart, so I would not put sugar on the top. However, you definitely could. This is kind of the most painstaking part of the process, but I think it's worth it. And that one, it got stuck to the table a little bit, but that's okay. Just rolled it up. Good. I'm probably going to just rearrange those and tuck this one on the outside. And there we go. That is then ready to go straight into the oven. What I tend to do with my extra crust is I'll just make it into balls and bake it because I like to treat them like cookies. The other thing that you can do is mix brown sugar and cinnamon and a little bit of vanilla and take a half a tablespoon of that, wrap it in crust, and then it makes basically sweet cookies.
You want to show them the oven?
Yeah, so I use a 425 degree oven. Our oven is set to 400 because it's 25 degrees hot. Just goes straight in. Yeah.
So we have this
Thing. This was a birthday present. And what this does is it protects the crust from burning before the pie is done. And then when the pie is done, it looks like that.
Ooh.
So those are the roses that I made earlier. This is a little bit darker than I would have liked it because I didn't wrap it as soon as it went in. You can also just use foil for that. But you can see the rhubarb has kind of melted and it's really good.
The only problem with these cooking sessions is we don't have a tasting portion at the end.
I know. I was thinking like I'm making these wonderful desserts, and then you have to make it yourself before you can taste it.
And I'm hungry too.
It's like it's the worst timing. It's right around lunchtime. You can say hi. Mom's in the background. Hi.
I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. So the other thing we're going to make while that's in the oven is chai tea. And I mentioned this earlier, but this is actually a recipe from my brother's preschool teacher, who I specifically asked her for the recipe because I tend to make it with tea bags, but that's not the proper way to make it. So for that, we're going to come over to the stove. Right. So the teacher who gave me this recipe is from Bangladesh, and this is the recipe that her mother taught her. And I was lucky enough to have it given to me as well. So we're going to start with, I'm gonna get a different measuring cup actually. We're going to start with a cup of milk and a cup of water. And this serves two, but obviously you can you can multiply it for however many people you have. And then let me actually double check the recipe. This is a new recipe for me too, so I have to look at it. Okay. So we have whole cardamom, whole cloves, and sticks of cinnamon.
Can you use almond milk or coconut milk instead of plain milk?
I haven't tried, but I guess that you can. I'm gonna move this to the back burner because our stove has issues. Could you use almond or coconut milk? I'm gonna put it around medium heat, which is about as high as I would ever put that small pot. And we're going to, if I can open this bag, there we go. We're going to add about 3 to 5 cardamom pods. Bottle now, it's the difficult part. Is this open or is it just cracked? I think it's just cracked. Okay, cool. I just made that worse.
Do you ever use
2
low
whole
fat milk?
cloves. Oh yeah, we have we use low fat milk. That's actually what I just put in. I prefer whole milk, but my mom doesn't let me get it. So and then it's a couple cloves and then a stick of cinnamon, and we have to wait for that to boil. I actually had issues finding loose black tea. So what we're going to be doing for the black tea, which we put in later, is just cutting open tea bags, which will work because we put it through a strainer before we drink it. I'd probably be called a heathen for doing that if I told Mr. New about it, but she doesn't have to know. An important thing with milk is to make sure you stir it very often. Milk burns really easily. So I'm just gonna cut these open. And this is just plain black tea. And just empty it into there. Can you look at the recipes at 2 or 3 teaspoons? Teaspoons of tea. How many? 3. Okay. Let me do these both at once. We don't, however, add the black tea until the milk is boiling. And you can see kind of some of the spices coming out. You can see like the little seeds. Like I said, we will put this through a strainer, so that's not anything to worry about. That's like, yeah, that's probably 3 teaspoons. If I need more tea bags, we have them. Normally at this point of making pies, what I would be doing is finding something to do with the rest of my crust, because I inevitably have extra. And we have extra because I've made 2 pies today, which I'm sure my brothers will not, or my family will not complain about.
Anyone have questions while Alex is in the prep mode for the second recipe?
Hey, Alex, I just
Yes.
checked one of my favorite stores, the British Isle store in the Village. They have loose black tea.
The British Isle store in the
Isle
Village.
Store and Rice Village.
All right, I'll have to go then.
Besides,
British Isle
it's a fun
store.
place. It's a fun place.
I will have to visit then.
It's an adventure. Do you just store it in the fridge and sometimes have it cold?
What do I store in the fridge? What was the question?
tea. The chai tea. Do you have it cold
Oh.
sometimes and just store it in the refrigerator?
I prefer it hot, but I suppose you could once you've strained it. As I mentioned, this is a fairly new recipe to me too, so I haven't been able to experiment much with it. I prefer hot tea, definitely. So I'm just going to go back to the pie dough from earlier because I didn't ever put it away. Yes, please. So this is both a top and bottom crusts worth of pie dough. We're going to ignore that. And take this out and just kind of try and get everything I can off the blade first. And then I'm going to, this is when the mat also comes in very useful because I can just put all the pie crust on it and not worry about having to clean it up because it'll just get picked up when I roll out crust later. I'm just going to kind of roughly press it together. You can I don't know how well the camera picks up on this, but if you get closer, you can see there are definitely still distinct pieces of butter in there. And that is exactly what we want. So once I've got it into an approximately symmetrical shape, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to roughly cut it down the middle. No.
And that's just a flat spatula.
Yep.
that they're cutting with.
Yeah, it doesn't have a sharp blade on it, which means I can use it on this with no worry. When I'm working just on straight granite, I'll sometimes use a knife because it's easier, but that works just as well, especially when I'm just working with straight up crust.
If for some reason you weren't gonna use this right away, can you freeze pie dough at this point, or does that really mess it up?
So I've frozen assembled pies. I've never frozen the straight up pie dough, but I have made a rhubarb pie to where it's ready to put in the oven and then frozen it with we put it in, I think it was just a 2-gallon plastic bag, and took all the air out of it and put it in the freezer, and it survived pretty well. I made sure to go through the whole process of getting all the liquid out and all that before and then we defrosted it. Yeah, and we defrosted it in the fridge and then put it in the oven, and it was good. I think we had that for a part of my birthday too, if I remember correctly.
Alex, if you want to
yes.
make the pie with more fruit, do you just suggest doubling everything?
I wouldn't double the amounts because then you'd have a very heaping pie. I might do 1.5. But yeah, I think 1.5 is as high as I would go just to avoid spilling out of the pie. One second. Okay, so you're gonna add the black tea and lower the heat completely. Yes. Okay, so the tea is now at boil, or the milk is now boiling. So we're gonna add 3 heaping teaspoons and turn it down to a low simmer.
3 heaping teaspoons of black tea.
Loose black tea, yep. You need another tea bag? All right. And then it's going to simmer for 2 minutes.
That can be adjusted to your.
Yeah. It's going to simmer for 2 minutes, and then we're going to take it off the heat and let it sit for 2 more minutes.
You're muted, Alex. Alex, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh.
Downside of having multiple devices and people. So normally what I do at this point is I would weigh them. I would weigh these two and figure out which one was slightly heavier and label that as used for the bottom crust. They're generally within about 10 grams of each other, so it doesn't make a huge difference, but it's something that I tend to do. I can't roll out a perfect circle, so I always end up with scraps no matter which one I use. But that is something that I tend to do mostly out of habit at this point.
I liked what you said earlier about using the scraps for cookies.
I absolutely love doing that. I'll get a a cookie pan, cut it up into, here, they're generally pieces about that big. Just eyeball it, bake them for about 10 minutes, and they are so good. It's just straight up flaky pie crust.
Then you can pour the rhubarb
Ooh, I've never tried that.
on top of
You
it. What
should.
do you call it? It's, what's the word for that? It's not juice, right? What would you call it?
I call it cordial, is like the closest word I've found for what it is. But I've never really, I also just call it the pie juice, which is kind of a weird way of putting it, but it also works. The other thing is, if you do end up with liquid at the bottom of your pie plate, you can basically do the same thing with it. It's effectively the same liquid, just with some pieces, you'll sometimes get little flakes of pie crust, especially if it has little flakes of pie crust. I would recommend using it as soon as possible because there's extra sugar in there and you don't want anything to grow. But I tend to just drink it with my pie as soon as I have my pie, which works really well.
Well, Alex, while I know you're waiting for the tea, and
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much to you and your family, not only to you for giving back the synagogue, but your parents are awesome leaders, and I know they both work really hard, and we wish you the best in college. And
Thank
pass
you
it to
so much.
Karen, who just a baton to Karen. And
Are there any questions in the chat? I can see that there are messages in the chat. I just can't see what they are.
just asking for the recipes.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Okay. Will those be, Karen, will you send those out?
Yeah, I put them in the chat, and for people that were having a hard time pulling it from the chat, they sent me a note, and I emailed them to them directly. I think everyone saw the rhubarb pie recipe because that was a PDF, but the chai is, I was just cut and paste the text. So if you didn't see it, it's pretty much, actually, it's the very top of the chat.
And I sent that to you.
Yeah, and I
sent it to you as a PDF. So if
the
you want to
recipe
send
was
that out as well.
Well, the recipe, the pie recipe is a PDF, and I attached that in the chat. And
Okay.
the chai was Word, and so I just cut and pasted it rather than attach it as a Word document.
Got it. Okay. And the tea recipe is very simple, and part of what was in the message was basically adjust to your taste. So
I'm
yes,
going to be honest,
right.
and I'm probably not going to buy cardamom pods. So do you have any idea what the substitute, if I just bought like the ground spice, which is, which I already have in the house? So pretty.
I don't know, but Google probably does.
Fair enough.
So yeah, we're straining it now into a teapot with some success. We decided to be extra fancy. It looks like there probably is some spice collecting at the bottom, which is why it isn't straining.
And
really
where
well.
do you get such a beautiful teapot?
That was actually a wedding present from my mom's best friend from high school.
Ooh, you made out.
So I could not tell you where he got it.
In Princeton, New Jersey.
In Princeton, New Jersey, apparently.
It always kills me that we can't smell. We can see and we can't smell, especially with chai. Well, and pie, I guess both of them.
Yeah, as soon as someone figures out how to share smell over the internet, they will be a millionaire.
So if we get to do like a sisterhood meet and greet membership event in the fall, can we do the rhubarb pie and the chai tea party? I think that would be pretty.
Ooh, good idea.
I would be.
It's like the dessert, the chai tea and the thing.
Chai and pie. Oh, you know, we could call it.
That sounds
We could
good.
call it pie and pie.
Chai and pie.
One small hiccup though, y'all will have to make it yourselves.
We'll zoom you in. We'll invite you. Where are you going to be again? I missed that.
I'm probably going to be in Boston.
Yay! Would that be Boston or would that be Cambridge, my dear?
Boston. I'm deciding between Wellesley and Emerson colleges at this point. So,
Good job.
oh, yes. Oh, it's really good.
Party at the Lewis house, party at the Lewis house.
Yeah, we really, it's a bummer that we can't have you all over and share this because it's definitely something that should be shared.
Well, I've had amazing experiences after these cooking Zooms. I made Shelley's kosher pot pie, and I bought the nutso that Michelle introduced, and oh my gosh, this has been just such a great experience.
That's true. Actually, I've been making the turkey wraps that Michelle had recommended over Passover, where you wrap it in lettuce leaves, instead of like a tortilla.
Ooh.
And we've had that a couple weeks now.
Thank you for that reminder. I just bought some ground turkey, so that would be really cool to make like turkey tacos inside the lettuce. Thanks for that reminder.
Well, y'all, if you end up making this, you have to tell me how it goes. Because the filling is pretty much a recipe of my own creation from a lot of experimentation. So I'm very, very curious to see how it goes for other people.
It looks really good.
How do you reward the cameraman?
He gets a slice of the pie and some of the tea.
Sounds good. Good deal. Good payment.
Y'all, I just noticed the time.
Oh.
I mean, and some people may need to, yeah, exactly. Some people may need to head out. And if so, just wanted to thank you for coming. If y'all did have trouble getting the recipes, pulling them from the chat, send me an email and I will make sure that you get them. I still want to know how soon the pie is going to come. Is the pie going to come out of the oven during this Zoom?
If you wait about 4 more minutes, then yes. It cooks for about 25 minutes. I set it for 5. So it should be out very soon.
Well, I have to pop off, but I am looking forward to adding rhubarb pie to our Shabbat dinner this week. So, and maybe
please let me know how it goes.
Ooh, yeah, good idea, Debbie.
Yeah, we'll go for a dairy Shabbat this week. But thank you. It was really fantastic. It was wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I'm glad I hooked you up.
Thank you for
making. Let's try somebody. I'm like, well, there you go.
Yep.
And you have a lot of talents.
We have a cooking show host here.
I am happy to be
blowing the shofar, Lynn.
Huh?
In addition to blowing the shofar, you have a lot of talents.
No, I just picked her. This is her talent. We just happen to know each other, and I know how much the family loves to bake and stuff.
We for Thanksgiving last year, we made, how many courses was it? An absurd amount of food for the 5 of us because Brennan was home. We had a very decadent Thanksgiving dinner, despite the fact that we were in quarantine. I think we were cooking for probably 2 days beforehand. It was a long process, but we really had fun with it, and it's something we tend to do as a family, which makes it even better.
Hey, I did discover one good Passover recipe I'll tell you about, and I can, I guess, take a picture of it and email or whatever. It's a potato crepe, potato flour crepe.
Ooh.
And you can do anything you want with it. It's one of the, it says it's a building block. Like if you wanted to fry it and cut it in strips, you can make noodles for your soup, or you could make a savory crepe or a sweet crepe. I was like, it actually tasted pretty good. Basically, it's water, potato starch, and egg.
Nice. Okay, so timer just rang. That is looking
Oh,
just
God.
about
This is
done.
really unfair.
Yeah, I know. I'm torturing y'all. But so I'm going to take that out. It's just bubbling slightly, which is what we want.
Oh,
So-
my gosh.
This is the Weight Watchers version, no calories.
I don't think that you can have this with no calories.
So
But
beautiful.
we take that off, and
Yum.
the crust is browned. And once it cools off enough, we are definitely going to have a fabulous pie.
Mm.
Can you slice your cold one so we can see the consistency before you zoom off, my dear? Like, how solid is it?
So this one, I didn't actually manage to get as much of the liquid out as I would have liked before putting it in the oven. So I was trying to finish it before the Zoom started.
Got it.
So this one is much more liquidy than I would have liked. As my family consistently points out, though, it does not affect the taste. Whenever I criticize my pies, that's the response I get. Might have a little bit more.
I'll take that piece.
The first piece also always looks the worst, but that's what it looks like. And the bottom crust isn't holding together as well as I would have liked. So I may experiment with par baking this one actually in the future, but generally my experience is the longer I can let the filling sit before putting it in, the less of this we get.
It looks so good though. Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And to your
Absolutely. Mom just tasted it and she gave me a very approving nod. So I don't think there are any complaints here. Yeah.
Yum. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.
Bye all. Thanks,
This is
everybody.
really fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us your morning, Alex, and the two pie and your whole family for being camera crew. And,
Absolutely. We're happy to, especially because this is the result.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Well, it just makes us, look forward to the time where we can do this in person.
Oh,
Absolutely.
for sure.
All right. Well, with that, I'm good to sign off and
Okay.
tune in next Sunday.
See you all next week.
See you next week.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.